Imagine, it's late 1944 in the Pacific. Japanese admirals believe their submarines are still ghosts in the deep, stalking American convoys at will. They don't yet know that a new weapon is about to turn the ocean into a killing ground. A King of real-life god of war aimed not at cities, but at steel hulls hiding hundreds of feet below the waves. In the age before 24/7 war news and viral clips, no one on the home front could watch every convoy battle the way we scroll through Ukraine war updates today. But what happened over just 12 days would quietly change undersea warfare forever. Before we jump in, remember, these are not game levels or scenes from Assassin's Creed. They're real men, real ships, and real submarines that would never return to port. Setup. Japanese submarine. Threat for Japan. Submarines were supposed to be the silent patriots of the empire. Long-range predators meant to cripple American logistics and force Washington to negotiate. U.S. sailors called them shadow raiders of the sea because they appeared without warning, fired a deadly shot of torpedoes, then slipped back into the dark. By 1943 and 1944, American code-breaking and better escorts had given the U.S. a huge edge. But depth charges were still a blunt tool. You dropped them, hoped they fell close enough, and listened. Most attacks ended with nothing more than bubbles and guesswork. For the sailors on destroyer escorts, it was like hunting stranger things in a black ocean evil, unseen and maddening. Meanwhile, back home, the only war news most families saw came as a few paragraphs in the dispatch or a short radio bulletin. There was no endless scroll of breaking news, no live map like today's coverage of Ukraine. If a destroyer escort sank a submarine, it might share a line with baseball scores, Christmas ads, or music reviews. Entered the Hedgehog, so the U.S. Navy needed more than luck, they needed precision. The answer was a weird-looking spiked launcher bolted to the bow of escort ships. The Hedgehog, instead of rolling barrels off the stern, Hedgehog fired a salvo of small contact bombs ahead of the ship in a tight oval pattern. Each bomb only exploded on direct contact. That meant no towering plumes for the cameras, no dramatic meme-worthy footage, but it also meant that if you heard an explosion, you knew you'd scored a hit. To the young sailors, this new weapon felt like something out of another era, a mechanical god of war sitting right on the forecastle. Some joked that the spiked bombs looked like Halloween decorations someone had dragged out too early. Others nicknamed them sea mines for baby tiny compared to depth charges, but far more lethal if aimed right. The 12-day hunt. Now we come to those 12 days that stunned Japan. Picture a small U.S. escort group guarding a convoy, a mix of destroyer escorts and frigates. The humble patriots of the mid-ocean war. They didn't have the glamour of carrier pilots or the mythic aura of marines storming beaches. They were the quiet raiders of the escort fleet, steaming endless zigzags across gray water. One night, sonar picked up a faint contact. A Japanese submarine was trailing the convoy, waiting for the perfect shot. The escort swung out of line, sonar ping ringing like minimalist music in the dark. The sonar operator called range and bearing, voice steady but tight. The captain ordered the first Hedgehog attack. The ship charged straight toward the contact. Seconds stretched. At the calculated moment, the launcher fired dozens of projectiles arcing into the night sea. There was no thunderous roar, just a series of soft splashes as the bombs hit the water. In the plotting room, a young sailor whispered a quick prayer, the kind a baby might mumble if they understood fear. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Suddenly, a sharp, brutal explosion ripped through the hull of the unseen submarine. The Hedgehog had done its work. For those men, that moment was burned into memory like a perfect cinematic shot, no need for special effects, Stranger Things, or flashy editing. The captain logged the sinking in the ship's report. Back home, the event would show up as a single line in the dispatch and maybe a one-sentence mention in other war news. At sea, though it felt like beating the god of war itself, the real shock came when these attacks kept working. In a span of just 12 days, American escorts armed with Hedgehog mortars hunted down and destroyed 7 Japanese submarines, 7 steel coffins, each packed with trained crews, torpedoes, and bitter experience vanished into the depths. For a navy already stretched thin by fuel shortages and constant defeats, losing 7 subs in so short a period hit Tokyo like a punch to the lungs. Japanese staff officers reading the damage reports must have felt as if they were seeing a glitch in reality, like the plot twist from a future series such as Stranger Things. Not the orderly, heroic war they'd imagined. Each new sinking sounded less like isolated bad luck and more like the storyline of some cursed meme that refused to die. Officially, those 12 days were just another part of the vast Pacific campaign, far from the frozen forests of Europe or future battlefields like the Ukraine war. Unofficially, they were a turning point. Proof that Allied anti-submarine tactics had evolved into something devastatingly efficient. If you tried to explain this to modern audiences, raised on World War-style shooter games and Hollywood blockbusters, you'd have to strip away a century of visuals. There was no glowing HUD, no dramatic soundtrack, no Assassin's Creed-style slow-motion kill cam, just men staring at sonar screens, officers judging bearing and speed by gut and training, and a spiked launcher belching metal into the night. Yet, in its own way, this was the war of the underwater world, a brutal, unforgiving contest where a single mistake meant a steel tomb at the bottom. Every successful Hedgehog attack showed up quietly in wartime logs, but together they reshaped the undersea balance. On the Japanese side, crews became more cautious, more nervous. The ocean had turned hostile in a new, invisible way. Some survivors later described the psychological impact of knowing that a single accurate Hedgehog pattern could end their patrol without warning. The brain rot of fear crept in whispers that no tactic, no clever evasion, could guarantee survival anymore. On the American side, confidence grew. Commanders demanded more Hedgehog-equipped escorts. Training films explained how to synchronize sonar, speed, and firing solutions. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. To a public that only heard filtered news, this kind of victory rarely went viral. Yet if you had frontline reporting networks back then, those 7 kills in 12 days would have been headline after headline. On the home front, Familias didn't get detailed breakdowns of anti-submarine sweeps. They were busy with rationing, writing letters, and trying to hold on to normal life. Kids played with toy guns, listened to music on the radio, and waited for holidays like Christmas and Halloween, even as fathers and brothers vanished into far-off oceans. Once in a while, a local paper would run a story. Enemy submarine destroyed by local ship. Maybe the ship's name appeared, maybe not. For many, it blended into the flood of generic news from the front. Only years later, historians and veterans would piece together just how decisive those escort groups really were. Today, when we binge-watch documentaries, scroll war news about the Ukraine war, or share a meme about some new brain-rot trend, it's easy to forget how quiet most victories were in World War II. There were no push notifications when a Hedgehog pattern found its mark, only a distant tremor in the deep and a line in a logbook. The legacy of those 12 days, and of the Hedgehog in general, goes beyond 7 submarines. It showed that technology plus training could flip the script on a hidden threat. It turned escort ships, once seen as expendable little brothers, 2 big battleships, 2 deadly hunters. In the decades after 1945, anti-submarine warfare kept evolving. Better sonar, rockets, helicopters, nuclear subs. But the core idea remained the same. Use precision, not just brute force. Target, close in, and deliver a clean, lethal shot. If you look at modern conflicts, from the cold depths of the Atlantic to the headlines coming out of Ukraine, you can still see the same pattern. Behind every flashy clip, every dramatic report, there are patient professionals doing the quiet, exact work, like those sailors who fired a Hedgehog, waited in silence, and listened for the explosion that told them an invisible enemy was gone. So the next time you launch a torpedo in a World War game, or hear thundering soundtracks in a cinematic trailer that feels like a new God of War story, remember these, somewhere in the Pacific, in just 12 days. Real men on real ships changed the course of undersea warfare with a spiked launcher and nerves of steel. No special effects, just a handful of escorts, 7 submarines, and a weapon called Hedgehog that made Japan realize the deep ocean was no longer their safe hunting ground. That's the untold story behind those 12 days. One more chapter in the vast, messy, and very human saga we simply call the war.